This past couple years, really, there's been a really big push by conservatives to demonize trans people. Fat grafting, they're going to take from my stomach to give it more of like a real feel.
You can have some of mine. I don't need it.
There's a group of probably about 10 detransitioners that they cycle through. They get paid a lot of money to say the things that they do. This is kind of uncomfortable, but I'll never know what it feels like to be touched.
That's brutal.
And
I feel the same way because I'll never be able to be touched by a femboy because I'm married, you know?
There are so many people that get these surgeries at the age that I got them.
And they're happy.
And they're so much better for it.
Yeah.
When I was transitioning from girlhood into adulthood, I was shown being a woman is to be objectified and to be in pain. And I didn't really want that. When you transition into being a man, you lose that sort of like camaraderie.
All right. Somebody recommended this in the Discord. It was August. You guys know August recommends stuff like this all the time. And she insisted that we watch this. I think it's a she. I don't know. Anyway, it's called Detransitioning at 17 years old. And I'm curious, you know, for me, I'm obviously very, trans affirming. I think that we should provide like mental health resources, gender affirming care to people who need it. But I think we should also talk about detransitioners because some people might get this misdiagnosed or something, and it's something to learn to make sure that when we diagnose somebody properly with gender dysphoria, as a society, that it is the right pathway to go. And it seems like we are doing that for the most part, but it's also good to listen to some detransitioners, you know. So like, I'm curious about what the experience is. So let's get this going.
Welcome back to the show. This
turn myself
podcast
down.
is sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online.
Okay.
If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit BetterHelp.com/insane today to get 10% off your first month. BetterHelp is not a crisis line, and BetterHelp is spelled better, H-E-L-P.
Did people have a problem spelling help? Interesting. Like specifically the word help. How do people think help is spelled? If they had to clarify that. I understand if they were like, they spelled all of it, better help. Okay, whatever.
My name's Cassie. I'm 18.
Okay.
This is my experience with transitioning and detransitioning as a minor. I guess
I wonder if they went on hormone. Well, probably, right?
Tell you about my parents first.
Okay.
Okay.
My dad is a diagnosed narcissist, and my mom has the same anxiety issues that I have.
Okay.
And so basically a narcissist and an enabler.
Got it.
And I've got 2 older brothers and a little sister, and a whole lot of like mental issues run in the family. My grandmother was bipolar, and my oldest brother and I inherited that. It's
help.
caused a lot of turmoil.
Yeah.
You can imagine.
Did you experience like your anxiety and stuff pretty young?
Yeah. I think
It's funny. Well, it's not fun. Well, I guess I have a detransitioner friend who, you know, they thought that they were trans, and they also had like anxiety and depression and stuff, and it was those are some, I think it's called the comorbidity of having gender dysphoria. And I feel like sometimes it could be like that could be an issue with the diagnosis as well. For some people, they may have a different underlying problem. Maybe they get misdiagnosed in some capacity, you know. So
some of my earliest memories are being scared of strangers.
Same.
My gender
Same?
struggles started when I was like 9 years old, probably. That's when I found out what being transgender was from online and started privately, like internally identifying that way.
So did it kind of start as like a confusion, and then you started doing your own research?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I mean, that makes sense. That's as interesting to me. I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with exploring like what gender means to you or your gender. For like a young person to be like, oh, okay, like, well, what is this? Oh, okay, and then maybe explore what it means to you or what like your masculinity or femininity or being a boy or being a girl like means to you in some capacity, right? Because we even know now that people have different interactions with what it means to be like a man or a woman, like different higher values or different values on what it means to be these things that aren't necessarily even associated with genitals in some capacities, you know? Like, obviously, Andrew Tate's not a real man. He's a sex trafficking piece of shit, right? So that's like that's my mentality for it. So we do this fundamentally.
I started developing like puberty very young. My chest started developing when I was probably about 7 or 8 years old. And my first memory of that was standing in the shower with my hands like this, trying to push it back in to stop it from growing. And it was always something I hated. I would layer sports bras on sports bras to try and flatten it. That whole like probably 10 to like 15 is a pretty blurry time of my life. I was groomed online when I was 10 years old, and then abused by another intimate partner at 15.
Okay.
In sort of one right after the other.
It kind of makes sense to me why they might have like a negative association with their breasts, and because like that would be something that would be considered sexualized. And since she had like horrible, I'm assuming that their pronouns are she, had like horrible experiences like that, I could see why they might want to distance themselves from that. But that might not necessarily be like, it's a difference between wanting to distance themselves from like sexualization because it got them traumatized versus distancing themselves from being a woman, if that makes sense. It makes sense to me why like that would happen potentially. So
yeah. And the summer between 8th and 9th grade, I had my mastectomy. I had my chest removed.
Okay.
And
that's young.
Yeah, when I was 14.
Wow.
Was that something like mentally that you knew that you wanted for a while, that you were like preparing for, or how did that come about? With your parents and everything.
I thought at the time that I had been wanting it for forever, and thinking about it a lot. But now looking back, it was like a year before I got it that I decided I wanted it.
Okay.
Right.
It felt like I had been struggling for my whole life, and that this was the only way to fix it. Well, that's basically what I was told by
who?
Gender affirming therapists believe that gender transition is the only solution to gender dysphoria.
So that's factually like not correct, right? And the reason I say that is I would not doubt that their therapist or their care person. What exactly did they say?
Therapists.
Gender therapists, right?
What I was told by gender affirming therapists.
Yeah, not all of them think that. I remember I had a conversation with like a gender therapist that talked about how there are some people that have gender dysphoria that the proper treatment for them is to not transition at all and actually identify with like their assigned sex at birth. That's what they would be considered. I wouldn't doubt that hers was like that, and that's a problem because you need to explore all boundaries and avenues. Excuse me, but that's not what all of them think, and unfortunately, I would also say that there are a lot of bad people with mental health, like individuals in general out there, and because it's a relatively new field and we're learning like relatively new things, every day. We could just try to make better and better choices. And it sounds like this person may have fallen through the cracks.
Only
solution
to gender dysphoria, and well, I can look back now and see that it was a whole mess of other issues. It was an eating disorder and my autism.
One thing I'd want to ask is, do you feel like immediately after you got the mastectomy, did you feel better? Did you feel better after you got the mastectomy, or did you feel like worse? Because again, to me, it seems like this individual is struggling with other traumatic experiences associated with like them being sexualized, and they removed their breasts because of that, and they may have misdiagnosed themselves as having gender dysphoria, and then they went to a therapist that may have been too over affirming instead of like actually trying to discover what the real problem was. Because it's a very complicated thing, and so I wonder if in like the short term it actually may have helped her in some capacity, or them. I'm gonna say them. I don't really know 100% because I don't know how they identify anymore. It's just an interesting question that I would have,
liking change and a whole lot of stuff. But at the time, that's what I was diagnosed with, and that's what they were telling me I had. And they're telling me, you have this. This is the only way to fix it.
And there's another, and this person mentioned that they also thought that they had gender dysphoria from the internet. Which I wouldn't doubt. People do this to like people. I go on WebMD all the time. My wife's like, "Oh my god, I think I'm dying," and it's like she has a cough. She's like, "I think I have like this horrible thing," and it's like, "You what?" The only reason I bring it up, is because the therapist probably did think that's what you had, or they had. They also went to the therapist saying that they had that, you know, and it gets into this like interesting like, you know, dynamic. Obviously they're a kid, so you'd want to properly explore that. But, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, if you're looking to be affirmed on something, this is one of the problems. Like, people in general, you can look at something, a lot of time it's mental health related, and you can look it up online, like, how do these things manifest? And you can go to the doctor and say you have these symptoms, and it can be a little bit easier to get these diagnosed, you know? And so there's just a lot of different aspects to this, I think, that are worth, you know, bringing up. You know, because if she was, like, educating herself, I think it's her, on gender dysphoria, and then went to the doctor, said, I'm having all these symptoms, and the doctor's like, okay, like, you know, that's the information they're getting. And when it comes to mental health, like, you being potentially dishonest to your therapist or your mental health, you know, it doesn't help you. It certainly doesn't help you. And then factor that in with her being a confused 14-year-old and like not knowing and just like trying to figure out, and it just becomes a very complicated thing. And I don't know that I don't mean to be rude, but I don't know if all of it is on the fault of the therapist necessarily. Though I think that there is still definitely some. But
So what else was I going to do, basically?
And I know that you said that when you first started kind of doing your own research, you kept that to yourself, right? Like pretty private. When did you open up about that to anyone else?
The 6th grade,
Okay.
I like changed my name and pronouns on Instagram and stuff, and at school. And then when the 2016 election happened,
12?
my parents, I was really upset about the results, and my parents were concerned that I was so upset.
11 or 12.
And asking me why, basically. And I told them that it was because I was trans, and I was scared about the future.
So that was how you broke it to them. Okay. What was their response?
They didn't really have one. I don't think they knew what that meant.
Right. And everything that you knew and learned was probably from your own research, you said, right? Okay. Did you feel like there was a lot online that helped you? Or you were still kind of like just as confused yourself, you think?
Well, it gave me an explanation.
Okay.
That I sort of grasped onto.
Right.
But I don't think it was the right explanation. I think I saw a lot of people experiencing similar issues to me, went with the route they went with.
Yeah.
I started therapy when I was 10 years old. And then because a family member died, grief therapy. And then again,
Jesus, a lot of shit going on.
The 6th grade, after my parents discovered that I was cutting myself. The way that ended up happening was not great. My mom saw the scars on my arm, and
She probably punished her.
had a whole big like sit down conversation with the whole family. And
Jesus Christ!
a lot of things were said. My dad told me that I only ever think about myself.
Yeah, this is not the way to.
My own feelings about it were the only thing I considered, and that I was selfish because I was hurting myself.
So, really quick, if you ever have a kid or somebody that's engaging in self-harm, just want to let you know, this is not the way to deal with it. You don't punish the person for engaging in self-harm. Like, that just doesn't make sense. It's obviously upsetting to somebody that you love if you see that they're self-harming. I understand that. You know, it of course should be upsetting to you, but like, you have to not be super selfish. It's more about, you know, figuring out why are they engaging in the behavior, you know? But obviously, then this is a punishment. You don't punish somebody for doing something like this. It's obviously not the most effective method to get them to stop. You know, at that point, you're just trying to shame them out of the behavior rather than actually engaging in what caused the behavior in the first place. And it's certainly not going to help, you know, in any way, shape, or form. So, something to think about. Because this is obviously like the stupidest way to engage with this issue.
And I started going to therapy. And that therapist...
Like, the therapist is not a bad idea. But, like, you know, the whole family, too. This isn't something the whole family needs to know. It's, you know, you could deal with that with, like, you know, your child or whatever. And you don't need to make it... You want to keep it as limited as possible. You know, you don't need to go to the moon and back with how many people, you know, you need to let in on somebody's, you know, improper way of dealing with whatever stress that they've got going on in their life. Yeah. So, Jesus Christ.
Told me when I came out to her about being trans, she told me that I should find God, and that would heal me, and I wouldn't feel that way anymore. And we stopped going to that.
Wait, hold on.
About being trans, she told me that I should, and that I was selfish because I was hurting myself. and I started going to therapy, and that therapist told me when I came out to her about being trans, she told me that I should find
Jesus
God,
Christ.
and that would heal me.
Incredible.
And I wouldn't feel that way anymore.
I mean, why would a therapist even talk about that? Like, what's the point for the therapist then? Like, why? What's the difference between saying that about like grief too? Oh, you're grieving? Well, just find God. Like, I don't know. Why would a therapist ever say something like that? Okay, Jesus.
And we stopped going to that therapist shortly after that. I was never raised
Well, that's good.
religious, really. So I started testosterone about 10 days after my 14th birthday.
Okay.
And then I had in November, and then I had my mastectomy the next June. I honestly think I always knew it was a mistake. When I got so when you have that surgery, you're wrapped up in a lot of bandages, obviously.
Yeah.
And the appointment.
It's interesting that you shouldn't even be able to get that done like so early. I mean, I'd say at least 16, but 14, you know. And I say 16 only because like you can get breast implants at 16, so like for non-trans people. So if you're gonna have that standard, then you should let them get a mastectomy. But at 14, that seems. I mean, I even think 16 is too young. But like, really should have to wait till 18 for any type of surgery, in my opinion. Like I understand. I do generally understand like hormones and stuff. But Jesus.
After my surgery, where they took the bandages off, I started crying.
Yeah.
And
that's it.
My family and my therapist or my surgeon all thought it was like happy tears, but I think it wasn't. I'm pretty sure
like regret.
Yeah, like I knew that I had hurt.
It's interesting because they say they don't even know. It sounds like they don't even know. I think this person just has like a lot of struggles in general, and just wasn't provided like the correct resources. I mean, their family obviously doesn't understand mental health in general well enough. If they like shamed her for self-harming. So this person just is somebody that seems to have been failed by like every system, like the therapy system, the hospital, her own parents. Like, I mean, this is very unlucky. You know, I feel like that's really unfortunate.
In the long run, I remember probably a month after the surgery, I learned what a breast reduction was, and that's when I knew that I had made the wrong decision. Yeah. Because that's what I wanted, really.
Right. Just like smaller boobs.
I'd always told people that if I had been born with like B cups, I would have never gotten.
Right.
I wouldn't have wanted it. But I had like triple D's. Like I was,
Jesus.
it was inconvenient.
Yeah.
And I was 14, so
Busting.
I was like 130 pounds, and 20 of them were boobs. I kept identifying as trans until I was 17, so another 3 years after the surgery. And I think, well, throughout that time, I stopped identifying as like a man and started identifying more like fluidly.
Okay.
And I think it was like a stepping stone for me. Obviously, it's not that for everybody, but
right. Did taking the testosterone did that cause like a lot of differences in your body and that you noticed and stuff like that?
Yeah, but I don't really think I regret taking testosterone.
Okay.
That's fair.
I like my voice, and I like.
It sounds like this person might be like a little bit more like, I don't know, what do you call it, androgynous. You know, it sounds like they wanted to just be a little. I mean, to be honest with you, it sounds like they wanted to just be a little less feminine, and I think that I don't know. I'm not an expert. I don't know anything, but I think a part of that might have had to do with like the trauma they experienced by being like, groomed. They said, and then also, you know, assaulted. Like I feel like part of it might be that. You know, like I mean, the disgusting. I wouldn't doubt like a disgusting person was like, "Oh wow, you look so old for your age. You look so mature for your age," as like a justifier. Because people are disgusting like that. Like predators will say disgusting shit to justify why what they did was okay. So I really wouldn't doubt that, and that might have been part of like the experience. There was like, oh, you know what I mean, like that. I would not doubt that.
There aren't a lot of permanent physical changes with testosterone as much as there are with estrogen. Like my body fat redistributed to be a lot more like out of my hips and into my like arms and chest area, and that went back to normal. I still have to shave my face, but that's not a lot of women have to shave their faces.
True.
I don't think anyone could have stopped me from going on testosterone. I was a bodybuilder at that point. I was well, I hung out with bodybuilders. I was 14, but
Okay.
I had access to a lot of illegal testosterone, and I
Interesting.
think if I hadn't been able to get it the legal means, I would have done it through other means. My top surgery consultation was 15 minutes long.
Okay.
And they're usually supposed to be like an hour.
Are they? My main thing was like with a consultation on like a surgery. I'm not like, you know, you got somebody. I'm imagining that like you. Okay. I mean, I guess it makes sense for them to consult to see if they actually thought that they should get the surgery or not. Because I would say that the diagnosis is what was going to trigger getting the surgery, the availability of getting the surgery. So like that's more of the issue is like there wasn't properly explored there.
And I wasn't told basically anything about the actual consequences of the surgery. I wasn't told about like the nerve pain and phantom itches and pains. I wasn't told that I would never be able to breastfeed.
Interesting.
Or,
that's something that people should
experience sensation in my chest again.
Interesting.
And that's something I struggle with.
Yeah. Is it just completely numb?
That's terrible. They should obviously like let you know things like that so you can make a more informed decision, you know?
I can feel pressure.
Okay.
But not like textile
Got it.
sensation.
Oh wow, so you can't feel anything. They can't really feel much of anything. Wow.
But a lot of people are numb completely, especially people who have had. Well, I had a complication with my nipple grafts. So they take your actual nipples and they cut them down and skin graft them onto different parts of your chest. And mine rejected. They fell off basically, and that like I could have gotten sepsis.
Kind of like how I fell off on TikTok, guys. Or how I fell off in general. But mine isn't as bad, obviously.
I didn't, but my surgeon was completely unreachable after the surgery to my 3-month follow-up. Like, things easily could have gotten a lot worse than they are. Hi, kitty.
Go say hi.
My nipples rejected, yes. And I couldn't get in contact with the surgeon at all. Like, he wasn't answering his phone. Like, we were given his personal phone number. And the nurse's personal phone number to contact if there was an issue. Like 24/7 was supposed to be what it is, because surgical complications don't wait for business hours.
Yeah.
Is that real? They actually do that?
Couldn't reach them. There was also probably nothing that could have been done about that at the point that I noticed that something was wrong. But so they closed, and I've just got like scars.
Damn.
And
so that was never something that you were able to fix?
No.
Well, I mean, oh, Jesus, I got a hair in my throat. I wonder how much of that has to do with how much she, like, ended up regretting the surgery, too. Because I wonder if... Because this person seems to be, like, you know... I wonder if it was the surgery was done better, if they would have had so much distress associated with the surgery, too. And that part of this might have to do with the fact that this person was, like, wronged through the entire process after the fact. You know, it just seems like I said, everybody just seems to be failing this person. There doesn't seem to be a single like aspect that was like, yeah, this went well. You know, you know what I mean? Oh, this part went pretty well. It's like, nah, everything was just terrible. They didn't consult me long enough. I had complications afterwards. They didn't like answer the phone. I was completely fucked. I lost the sensation here. I had the complication surgery. And it's just like, Jesus Christ, you know?
There was a point when we were talking about getting tattoos done, but that never ended up happening.
Oh, you should get them done
now that I'm looking into breast reconstruction, that's probably it's a whole other surgery.
Okay.
A nipple reconstruction.
Interesting.
But that's also there was a bill that was passed in Maryland that's getting gender affirming care, which is now broadened to include detransition related care.
That's good. Is that never part of it? That was insane. I never knew that. Yeah, detransition care should also be included as well. I know that was redundant since I said also as well, but like, yeah, that makes sense to me. Sure, why not?
Maryland Medicaid, and so all of that should be covered.
That's good.
Starting in January, which I'm excited about.
Yeah,
they were.
That's good.
They were free to get off back in the day. They were covered by my insurance, so I feel like they should be free to get put back.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's a lot of pain, you know? Like, I lost organs. The surgery they give to
organs
transgender...
Maybe skin you're talking about?
Like, transmasculine
breasts?
people is different than the surgery they give to somebody who's getting it for breast cancer. They take all the skin, so there's no what they call inframammary fold. So it's completely flat, and they're gonna have to put a tissue expander in, which is a temporary implant that fills up with saline. They put more saline in it over time, over a couple weeks, and then a second surgery to take them out and put the implants in, and then another surgery, which is fat grafting. They're going to take from my stomach to give it more of like a real feel, and then a fourth surgery, which is the nipple reconstruction.
You can have some of mine. I don't need it. I got too much of it. You can have my tits, actually, if you want them. I have no use for them. So
and the tattoos, and then likely other surgeries down the road, and you have to get them replaced every 10 years. So I think I still have gender dysphoria from both.
Interesting.
Like both being perceived femininely and masculinely. I decided to detransition because I realized that none of the surgeries or the hormones were going to make me a cis man, which is what I wanted to be. I didn't want to be a lifelong medical patient. I didn't want to have to go in for blood work every 3 months for the rest of my life.
Interesting. So this person is a detransitioner, but they're actually still trans. I mean, that makes sense. It sounds like part of the problem, too, because this person seems to have like a lot of different issues with infrastructure that failed her, or them. I don't know. Fuck, you know. I wish... Did they say the pronouns in the beginning? That would have been nice. But anyway, it seems like a part of it is that, like, how robust was our conversations around, like, different types of, like, you know, like, non-binary and things like that back then, too. Because maybe that's more of what failed this person, you know, or part of it.
My life, which is what you have to do when you're on hormone replacement therapy. And I guess I've not really been able to escape that because I'm still going to have to be going in for surgeries at least every 10 years. So for me, gender dysphoria, it's basically inescapable because I get it from both sides of the spectrum. I'm uncomfortable being called like feminine terms, and I'm uncomfortable being called like masculine terms.
So what do they want to be called?
Those are the only terms that people are familiar with, like as a baseline. It's like shame. It's like feeling embarrassed is the closest like physical feeling I could compare it to. Like falling in public is what it feels like.
Sorry.
And it's sort of when it's not being projected from outside, when I'm not being referred to.
Bro, you could just call them she. You're not going to cancel. It's not about getting canceled. Like, what you think I give a shit about getting canceled? I say wild, outrageous shit every day on my stream. If you think I give a fuck about being canceled, like, you're just weird. It's about being respectful. Like, I would rather call them the appropriate things out of respect. I don't care about cancellation. There's nothing to do with cancellation. You know. Don't call me bro. Okay, I'm a man. You call me sir. It's my pronoun now. Fuck you. Just kidding. But
whatever.
I don't care about the cancel word.
It's like, how does this person see me? How even when I'm alone, it's like, oh, you look like a man right now, or you look like a woman right now, and then I get that shame, and it leads me to.
I hope they ask a question about like dating, like what they're dating, like what's going on,
like self-isolation, most of the time. Like this is the first thing I've done in probably 2 months. And I don't really like pictures to be taken of me, and I really don't like to hear my voice played back. But I think that's kind of universal. So before
I don't know, I love my voice. Sometimes it's cringe as hell though, I'm gonna be real with you. I'm supposed to climb this. Fuck my balls.
I transitioned. I was really like a daddy's girl. Like my dad was the closest person to me probably, and when I transitioned, I really lost that. I went from being like the golden child, the favorite, to like a weird gender freak.
Interesting. That's interesting too. That's sad. It sounds like what she's saying is that she lost it because her dad thought she was disgusting after that, or they were disgusting, whatever. That's just fucked up. I mean, that's not proper support metrics. That's another thing because, you know, I wonder how much of this was because they didn't get the right support. Like, that would be an example of not getting the correct support. If you go through like such a big change like that, and then afterwards, like, your family just treats you fundamentally, like, differently, you know, that's not getting enough support. I would see why that might be a factor. Oh my God.
Basically overnight. And that was hard. And I haven't really been in regular contact with my dad.
Was he just not very supportive with everything?
Damn, that hard? It's one thing to be like, okay, I have to adjust to this, but it's nothing. It sounds like he just didn't want to, like, it just completely stopped caring.
Everything?
No, and he was a narcissist, like I said,
Right.
and really didn't like anyone to do anything he didn't like. We weren't allowed to watch movies he didn't like or listen to music
Damn,
he didn't
same.
like.
Just kidding.
And he didn't like trans people, so transition.
Oh, well, that makes sense. Again, I wonder how much of this was because Dad didn't like trans people, you know? Or how much, like, it just seems like so much of this is the family. Like, the family or somebody. Yeah, man, like, fuck. I wonder how the different things would have been if they had more. Because that's one reason some people detransition is they don't get properly, like, affirmed in some capacity. They get treated like they get othered, you know?
No. I'm sort of having a realization right now that it might have been because during the time when I started feeling that way and started privately referring to myself that way was my emo phase, as you'd say. Like, I was a rebellious teen.
Rebellious
And,
team.
It could have
Rebellious
been
Wilson.
some form of rebellion, along with the real feelings that I was having.
Yeah.
But this past couple years, really, there's been a really big push by, like, conservatives to demonize trans people.
True.
Well, you've seen, like, all the healthcare bans and the bathroom bans and such.
Yeah.
And there's a group of probably about 10 detransitioners that they cycle through. And one of these people that or former one of these people.
Interesting. Yeah, you know, that's one of the things is that sometimes when people hear detransitioner, they hear like, oh, like, unfortunately, it's gotten so toxic that anytime someone hears somebody on the left hears detransitioner, they tune out and say like, oh, this is just a game that conservatives are playing to signal boost detransitioners to try to make it seem like trans people are bad, and that is what conservatives are doing. But I mean, you know, and I can understand why somebody who's a detransitioner might be very upset with, like, the concept of people having gender dysphoria because they were wronged in their diagnosis in some capacity or the way that they were treated. But I wonder if she's going to go into how she felt about that. Was she, like...
Well, someone who used to do this that doesn't anymore. I'm friends with, they get paid a lot of money to say the things that they do.
Wow.
To call themselves mutilated and disgusting freaks.
Wow.
And to allow conservatives to call them mutilated, disgusting freaks.
That's insane.
That's been very successful for them.
Wow. I didn't even think of them from that way. That's insane. There's a lot of people who get paid, detransitioners that get paid a lot of money to just talk shit about trans people. That's disgusting. I can understand them, like, not, you know, having a good association with being trans, but I mean, you know, it seems like a lot of the factor is how much money they get paid to lie. That's sad. Wow. Jesus Christ.
For the conservatives, for furthering that agenda. And so when we're a very small group, detransitioners. It's 1% of 1% of the population.
Yeah.
So a lot of trans people don't have any experience with detransitioners outside of conservatives saying, oh, see, look at these people, they regretted it, so yeah.
Right.
Or for those people to go up and be like, there's a woman, I don't know if I should name names, but
You can just say a woman or
yeah,
fake name, whatever you want.
there's a woman who had a pretty similar experience to me. She started testosterone at about 13 and got her mastectomy also about 14.
Damn.
And is now one of a few people suing the insurance group Kaiser Permanente for covering this procedure.
Why would they sue them for covering it? Wouldn't it be like the issue of the doctor? Like making the wrong choice? The hell? Oh, it's like muted. I'm sitting here like, what's going on here?
This procedure. And she's very famous. She got a standing ovation at a Ron DeSantis rally in Florida.
I mean, I don't know what we're talking about, but I'm sure it would be very easy to figure it out.
And she was on the Conservative Political Action Conference. And
CPAC.
She's very vocal. She's testified in front of lawmakers in like 14 states, and is making a lot of money from it.
Wow.
And this person is often the only detransitioner the people that say detransitioners are transphobic have ever seen speak.
That's what people think, that
Yeah.
detransitioners are transphobic.
Yes.
It's interesting. Which to me doesn't really make sense because I feel like it's more of like a physical, like detransitioning. I feel like is more.
Who are they talking about? Who is this person talking about? Who's a detransitioner at CPAC?
I would think is more of like a physical thing,
Yeah.
than it is anything else.
Detransitioning, any person of any gender can basically detransition.
Right.
Like, there are trans people who stop taking hormones to preserve their fertility.
Yeah.
They're detransitioners. There are,
And just because you choose to or not to do something doesn't mean you're like totally against
Yeah.
something. And I think too, something I wanted to add in was that I feel like, at that young of an age to make, like, that's a surgery is such a big decision. And it makes me wonder if like there almost should be like an age limit where like it almost
Sure, yeah, I think so.
forces you to kind of like wait it out just so you like mentally can think like, is this a decision that I really want to make when I'm 18 or something
Right.
like that?
Yeah, sure.
Just to give you that time. And
I mean, like, yeah, I mean, I generally agree. I think the unfortunate aspect is like there could be circumstances where somebody was like so dysphoric that they might like become suicidal because they can't get access to medical treatment. But if at all possible, they should definitely like wait it out. I get that. So
I think too, something else that wasn't on your side was information. Like, while yes, you were doing your own research,
I think that's the problem. There's too much information available.
you were kind of neglected, I feel like, by the doctors. Like you said, your consultation wasn't long. Like, I feel like there should be
Yeah.
more, I guess, information when it comes to, if you make this decision, here's what comes after that.
Right.
And here's something to remember. And I mean, I think too, like, as people, we always change our mind. Like, there can be
Sometimes,
years
sure.
that we're dead set on something. And then 10 years down the road say, I don't feel the same way. And I think
Right.
either way, that's fine too. But I feel like if there was more information and preparation, and then even like the post care and what things are like, or what you can and cannot go back on, or what's, not going to be the same ever again. I feel like that should be so much more
Yeah.
there than it is. You know what I mean? Like, it shouldn't just be an easy decision. Like, okay, you want to get your breast removed? Sure. Because I feel like down the road, if you decide to change your mind, then you face, okay, well, now I might have to get 4 or 5 surgeries. And I feel like it's things that like that aren't discussed, which should be.
And it's, even if I get those 4 or 5 surgeries, they removed.
I mean, don't you have to wait until you're 18? Apparently not. These people got that at like 14. Unless you think they're lying, I guess. But it seems like they're pretty credible. So, I mean, you can apparently get these surgeries. I mean, you can get like breast implants before you're 18 too. It's this problem. It's not just a trans thing. Like, it's an entire infrastructure thing. It's weird. So, maybe that.
organs
Yeah.
that I'm never going to have back. I'm never going to be able to breastfeed my children. Nope.
Kitty, come on.
What the hell? How many times is this cat gonna come in?
I was 14 when I had my surgery, so I mean, this is kind of uncomfortable, but I'll never know what it feels like to be touched.
Right.
Yeah. That's sad.
And that's sad.
Yeah.
Man, that's brutal.
And
Man.
so when I transitioned,
I feel the same way because I'll never be able to be touched by a femboy because I'm married, and I feel very similar to that, A lot of dysphoria with that. A lot of dysphoria. Sad stuff.
in
Just kidding.
2018, you had to have been identifying as trans for 2 years and been going to therapy for 3 years.
Okay.
And I had been,
Okay.
but I hadn't been going to gender therapy.
Yeah, but to say, like, they were going to therapy for 3 years, but it wasn't gender therapy. That seems a little too... Is that for minors transitioning, or... I wonder, because that seems like a long time to have to go to therapy. I get like a period of time, but that seems like a long time. But unless it was for a minor, that makes more sense because you're like too young.
3 years, which is 3 years, which is what you're supposed to, which is what they mean when they
Okay.
say that. I
Interesting. So they
found out
bypassed
that you
some of
need
it.
a letter for testosterone and top surgery. And I picked a therapist and I went in for one appointment and she wrote me the letter that I needed.
Interesting.
And then I had
Is that how it's not supposed to work, or what is the issue there? I wonder.
probably a 30-minute, like there's a packet that you have to go through.
It does seem like some of this is like very rushed, though. This is a little bizarre, you know. I wonder why. I wonder if that's just the way that because I feel like there's people like Jordan Peterson that thinks that there's some kind of a magical like, you know, entity that's trying to make people trans, because he thinks that like he thinks that the reason why there's more money being made, he thinks that there's like a conspiracy theory. I think it's more just like hospitals are lazy as fuck, and doctors are lazy, and they're ready to just hand out treatments so that like in general because they just don't care. You know, I feel like that's part of it. So
It's like, these are all the things that could happen. Your voice is going to drop. You're going to get body hair. Your body fat's going to redistribute for testosterone. And I signed off on that, and my parents signed it. And then I got it. Like, it was 2 appointments.
Right.
And then my top surgeon was 1 appointment.
And then that's the only surgery you got was the top surgery? Okay. Did you ever consider anything else, or?
Yes.
Okay.
I wanted bottom surgery at some point. I wanted it before I wanted top surgery.
Like, what do you think, I guess in your opinion, like what do you think changed for you where you were at a point in your life that you really wanted like the bottom surgery first, and then I know you didn't go through with that, but that you wanted that, and you decided to get your breast removed, and then now I don't want to say you regret it, and maybe you do, but I just feel like although it's a pain in the ass, like where it is now, I feel like sometimes we don't know unless we do things. And it's always not the easiest things, and it can be complicated, and a lot of things might follow that. But I almost feel like, how would you know if you never tried, you know, and if at one point you wanted that. But I guess, yeah, my question is, what do you think changed for you, like over the years of like wanting to go back on that? And
Yeah. I think a big part of what led me to experiencing the gender dysphoria in the first place was being sexually abused.
Okay.
Yeah.
My breasts being sort of a focus of that, and that shame.
Well, thank you so much for the 6 months sub. A little bit of a more cats on pods. Yeah, I agree. But but no, this is what I had said. Sorry, it was just like a weird time for the alert to come through. That's what I had said at the beginning. I think that has something to do with it. I think it had a lot to do with like trying to distance themselves from sexualization, from like having that terrible traumatic experience take place. You know, that seems to be like more accurate as to what happened, and it's just so many different aspects that failed this person in their life. I mean, you know, God bless them, honestly, for going through so much. That's brutal.
And that pain sort of read as gender dysphoria to my therapist.
Okay.
And then when
I wonder if this person talked to the therapist about their abuse.
16, I started going to a trauma-informed therapist, and started working through that. And I think once I started coming to terms with what happened to me, I realized that the consequences of the surgeries and the hormones were not what I wanted, and not worth the things that happened that I did want.
And like you said too, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said, I think that even doing those surgeries and everything like that, it didn't help you feel any different, right? And I think too, like that's kind of what they like told you was a solution and would help you. So I think going into something and then still feeling, I guess, confused or not like, you know, like what's, you know what I mean? Just not confident in your decision, I feel like can really be confusing even after that. You're like, okay, well, I'm doing what they suggested, and then I still am just not where I want to be. And now a word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. For 10% off your first month, go to betterhelp.com/insane. Start living a better life today.
Why is it so loud?
Life is a beautiful thing, but that's why I think
I'm gonna skip through this. So loud. Yeah, BetterHelp, guys. I hear they had a controversy, but hopefully they're better now. Hopefully they got better help.
There was this movement in the early 2010s on Primarily Tumblr. It's embarrassing to talk about to a real person.
Hey, listen, Tumblr was just apparently people just use it for porn, and once they get rid of that, died. You know, that's how it do be how it is sometimes, brother. It do be how it is.
The medical consensus for like a century before then was that gender dysphoria was what made you transgender, and transitioning was the only way to alleviate gender dysphoria, and you should only transition if you have gender dysphoria. And there was this movement primarily on...
Weird time for an ad roll. I think it was a perfect time for an ad roll, because that's when you're most engaged.
Chapter Super Shattered $1.99. Bigger guts Papa Town. I need a belly like yours.
I don't know if I wouldn't generally advocate for the purchasing of a belly like mine, but hey, I God bless, you know, God bless.
On Tumblr in the 2010s to say all of that's wrong, that you don't have to have gender dysphoria to be trans, that you can transition and not have gender dysphoria.
I don't. That's not. I know what they're talking about. You know, like what they were talking about on Tumblr was like, oh, anybody can be trans. You don't have to have gender dysphoria. You can just be like, you know, want to identify differently. And I don't know how much that would be the concept of like gender euphoria, non-binary people without dysphoria, which is obviously like two classes of people. You know what I mean? Obviously, somebody that has a diagnosis is probably struggling more. But you know, yeah, some of that's just like crazy Tumblr bullshit. Yeah,
and that you can transition or that you can
be trans and not transition.
Yeah, that you can be trans.
But that's what I was just like gonna say too. I feel like you can identify as something and be trans, but not necessarily want to go through all the surgeries and things like that.
There's a lot of complications.
Yeah,
that come
and they're
with
big.
that
Those are big decisions.
Yeah.
That's actually an interesting point too. Some people might even have gender dysphoria and just not want to go through with the stuff because it might just be too much for them. Which, same man, that would fuck me up too. It's too much.
It's removing organs,
right?
And there are people that want to be parents and want to breastfeed.
True.
And want to. There's a lot of reasons why someone would decide not to transition.
Right.
But sort of with this, these good things, the not needing to transition.
I hope that these are things that like they generally will express even to young people. You know, because I know that that could be tough for you to be like young. And here, like, you may not be able to breastfeed, or maybe I'll be able to do this, that, or the other thing. But this is stuff that, like, young people transitioning should be made aware of so they can make an informed decision. Even if it's a harsh decision, at least give them that decision. Give them that choice,
Not. There's also this idea that hormones are something you can play around with. That you can go on testosterone or estrogen, and if you don't like it, stop taking them. But synthetic testosterone was designed to cause permanent changes to your body. And synthetic estrogen, I'm pretty sure, was designed as a alternative to breast augmentation for cis women because it makes your chest grow. And those things are
I must have a lot of estrogen then.
Without surgery to remove. And they're not something you can play around with.
I just want to... my understanding is that, and I could just be wrong, my understanding is that when people say that it's reversible, they're not talking about testosterone or estrogen. My understanding is that they're talking about puberty blockers being more reversible, as long as you do them obviously within like a shorter period of time, right? Like, I mean, if you're on puberty blockers, like long term, it's going to have irreversible effects. But that's kind of the point at that point, right? Like, but I never heard, and this might just be me, I've never heard anybody make the claim that like testosterone and estrogen is supposed to be like what is it called? It's supposed to be reversible. Like that's what the point you'd be at, where like, oh, you would imagine generally that you were comfortable with the transition you were going through. So I never heard that before. But okay,
it is something you need to be sure about.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
And there was this idea that like a cis person wouldn't want this. A cis person wouldn't hate their breasts. So if you do,
True.
You are trans, and transition is the only way to treat.
The interesting thing is, because I understand what they're saying, like they had a different interaction with their body because of what happened to them. My thing is that they, and maybe it's weird because they still seem to identify as trans in some capacity, and maybe like it seems like they still are trans regardless of them being a woman or a man. It's more that they fall in some kind of like middle ground, you know, on a spectrum. So you know, maybe they wouldn't feel that way if they didn't go through the different hormones and surgeries. Or maybe like they were always trans. They just weren't like a trans woman. They just didn't realize like, you know, what was going on. They were still exploring themselves.
Your discomfort. And so like I was being told from my social circles that this was the only way. I was being told from my therapists and doctors that this was the only way. And
did you feel like you had like a pretty good support group even with friends, or not really? Like, did you feel like you were kind of on your own with all the decision making?
All of my friends were also trans and jealous of me, basically. So I couldn't go to them and be like, hey, I'm not really sure about this.
Right.
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
And if I did, they probably would have told me, well, a cis person wouldn't want this. A cis person wouldn't want to remove their breasts. So you're trans and you're doing the right thing. And the point of having to get the letter and the therapy before you're allowed to do these things is so that you can be properly evaluated and to make sure this is the right thing for you.
Yeah.
And so giving it out in one appointment is irresponsible. It sort of negates the point.
I wonder how long you're supposed to go without getting the letter. Only because like there seems to be so many ways in which this person has just been led wrong, but I wonder how much of it was like that. Like they're talking about how they couldn't even express to their friends that they may not want this, and so I wonder if they were just saying what they thought that the doctor wanted to hear, and their friends not being correctly supportive, just made them feel like being like, no, you know what, I am trans, and like almost convincing, or excuse me, yeah, they are trans or whatever, and just like excusing stuff. Because I just wonder how much of it's the doctor infrastructure versus like all of the infrastructure put together. But it seems like there's general problems with the doctors too.
Of the letter to begin with.
Right.
And my therapist was a gender affirming therapist, so she didn't even question if I was really trans or if this was really the right thing for me. I basically came in with these self-diagnosed feelings about myself and came in, I have gender dysphoria, I'm trans, I want this, and I need a letter for that. And she just accepted all of that. Like she just took it all at face value. Because that sort of negates the point of getting evaluated to begin with. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done with that system for sure. And I don't think banning it even for people that were my age is really the right call, because there are so many people that get these surgeries at the age that I got them.
And they're happy.
And they're so much better for it.
Yeah.
But it's something that can be so dangerous if there's not serious gatekeeping.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It's a longer process.
Right. When you say that, people will get upset because it's like you're delaying this for people who need it. But we're delaying it for the people who don't need it, that are going to get it if we don't delay it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
I get that. I generally agree with what they're saying. I would just put that as extra part in there. It's just, it seems like this person was completely failed by everybody. You know, I would like to think, and maybe I'm wrong, that a lot of other people who are getting access to like the gender affirming care, they have better maybe they have better friends or better family that are more like, look at Kelly Cadigan. Kelly Cadigan is somebody who was like generally supported by like their family, at least like their parents, which are huge. And they ended up being in a better situation. And so I wonder like how much of the blame isn't on the doctors as much as it's on like these, like everything. Like this person was just universally had like a rough time, you know?
And it's not taking it away. It's more so just prolonging it in the sense that people are getting the information that they need and being prepared for everything in every aspect.
Exactly, yeah. Trans kids deserve better than to be fast-tracked along this process and told that this is the only way. Because this isn't the only way. Talk therapy has been a proven good treatment for gender dysphoria. Their stance is that I was never really trans. I was confused and made a mistake, like singularly on my own. And that's confusing to me because I made that decision when I was 9 years old. And I couldn't, none of this could have gone any farther if I had just made that decision and that mistake. There were parents and doctors and therapists that were meant to be determining if this was the right thing for me. Like it was their job to determine if this was the right thing for me. And they were wrong. And they get really defensive about that. Trans people online. There's a lot of money in the trans healthcare game because a lot of it isn't covered by insurance. So you can get a lifelong patient who's going to be paying you at least $300 every month. And when you say that there are doctors that are greedy and will use this irresponsibly and will fast track people along this process to create lifelong patients for medical incentive or for financial incentive, it's even like people who claim to criticize the industry and people who claim to be like communists and who hate the for-profit medical industry will argue with me about this, that there are doctors who transition kids for financial incentive.
Yeah.
So the problem that I would have with that is, like, I would say that in general there are doctors that take advantage of the system, and I wouldn't necessarily doubt that there are doctors doing that, maybe, but I also don't think that it's any bigger in that community than it is in than it is in like just doctors in general. I think this is a fundamental system problem. Like, that specifically, to me, isn't a specific trans problem. That is a healthcare, like our fundamental healthcare problem. And so, like, that's something that needs to be addressed outside of that. Because there are a lot of conservatives who say that, like Jordan Peterson. Except he thinks that all of it is just for the money. He doesn't think that any of it is, like, because that's what they're saying. They're saying, hey, it absolutely is helpful for a lot of people who need it, but I think it should be slowed down. And there are some doctors who will, they will operate on financial incentive. Okay, that makes sense. Jordan Peterson will say, like, no, it's all financial incentive, right? I would say that, generally speaking, like, this is a fundamental healthcare problem that we need to tackle overall, and not just make sure when people hear it that they don't just focus on it from, like, a trans perspective. It's like in everything. It's like how our healthcare system works, unfortunately, especially in America.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And then did you say that now you still identify as trans, or you don't?
I don't really.
Okay.
I think I'm more of a woman than anything
I thought that they said that they did.
else.
Okay.
Some of the stuff this person says is a little confusing, because before they're like, I don't really like it when people call me like her, like basically him or her. And now they're like, no, I'm not. And I could have sworn that they said they still identified as trans, and now they're saying they don't identify as trans. I'm just getting confused. I feel like they're not being consistent with what they're saying, or is it just me?
Okay.
But
you don't like hardcore identify with one side of anything,
Right.
Really? Okay.
I don't really. They want it to be that I was just a cis woman who made a mistake. But
And what does that mean exactly?
a cis woman?
Yeah.
A cis woman is a biological female, someone who was born
Got it.
female who identifies as female.
Okay.
And that's also, like, being trans is identifying with a gender that isn't what you were born as.
Okay.
So it's confusing to me that they would say I was never trans, because I did identify
Right.
as a different gender. And I have gender dysphoria, which is what other people would say makes you trans. So they completely dismiss my side of things, my
Yeah.
perspective.
And not everything is clear cut in
For
this
sure.
world. Like, yeah, there might be some people that know right off the bat, and like you said, get these surgeries and make that decision, and they're happy with it. But then there also could be people that are confused, or they make a decision and they're like, well, I don't really know if I want to stick with that. And that's fine too, because not everything, we're not going to go through life with the same mindset
Yeah.
our whole life. So
Hit that grind set, baby.
When other people, when a trans person says that their identity has shifted over time and changed as they've grown, nobody really has an issue with that. But when I say that I was trans, that at that time I was a trans man, I believe. I was hospitalized because I attempted to cut my breasts off with a butcher's knife. And
Well, Jesus Christ. I mean, I can understand why they would fast track the process then if you were cutting them off yourself. Holy fuck, that's insane. Well, I wouldn't say insane, but that's a lot. That's intense. That's the word I was looking for. Sorry.
I was hospitalized many times after that.
There's just a few things that this individual says that gives me like mixed signals on what they're talking about sometimes. Is it just me, or like...
For suicidality caused by my gender dysphoria. I was trans, but because of how I identify now and how I present now, I must just be confused. and I was just.
I'm confused.
And I think too, like you said, which I think a lot of people might disagree with as well. Your circumstances.
Yeah, that makes sense that they might be sorting out their feelings live with us a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I wonder how many people have actually talked to them about this stuff. That makes sense to me.
Child, I think too, probably made you hate what came with being a woman.
Yeah.
You know, like having boobs.
But if my kid was like doing that to their breasts, I mean, like, I feel like, what else am I supposed to do? But have them, you know, get a surgery to take them off, right? I mean, I don't think that's a hot take.
And having that be something that, you know, men focus on. And having something negative happen to you, I can see how that could make you not want those things and not want to be a woman because it's scary.
Like right when I was transitioning from girlhood into adulthood or into womanhood, I was told, or I was shown that being a woman is to be objectified and to be in pain.
Yeah, true. You were showed that.
And I didn't really want that. When you transition into being a man, you lose that sort of like camaraderie with other women. Like women would pass the street or across the street when I would be walking towards them. And
True.
Like just things that are seen as harmless now that I do were seen as like I talk too much and I over-explain things. And
Yeah.
at that point in time, it was condescending because I was talking down to people, I guess. Also, transitioning, you get to see how men and
Jesus Christ.
in my point in time, 8th grade and 9th grade boys talk about women behind closed doors. And that was really scary.
Yeah, little kids are fucking obnoxious.
And I think that's probably why I realized I couldn't be a man. They treat
Interesting.
the word rape as like an accomplishment, like winning a game. And
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things that young men do that are very insensitive and lack empathy. I think like young men in general lack empathy. You know, I think each, you know, when I was like much younger, I remember using that word more freely. You know, everything was rape this, rape that. Like, haha, I'm gonna rape you in a video game and stuff. It's horrible. Like, and then thinking about it now, like, oh shit. Like that you know, I don't like to use that word. It's very strong. I think that's a lot of experiences. You know, for a lot of, I think it's a lot of stuff because I think that like young boys tend to be more racist. Like they don't, there's like an empathy factor missing there. They just say crazy racist shit because it's funny and edgy to them, you know? So like, yeah, I mean, I could see that and I could see why that would be scary, especially somebody who was assaulted, which because that's what she had, or this person had admitted to us. So like, yeah, I see that. I could see why that would be scary to somebody who was assaulted. Like, wow, this is like really brazen. I mean, I wonder again, like everything is failing this person. Like Jesus Christ, like this person, like I wonder, it's just everything. Like imagine being in that sphere and then everything is like really like loaded words and stuff. Wow, every bit of infrastructure failed this person. It is incredible. It is incredible. Jesus.
I couldn't let them know
Yeah, of course
that
not.
I
get
was
that.
someone who knew far too much about rape to ever think it was funny. And
Yeah, you're a kid. Kids will just
if I
bully them
did,
for that.
if they found out, I could be in real danger. When I realized that is when I think
They would probably just bully this person. You know, I don't know what they would call real danger, but like they would bully the shit out of this person. Because I'm assuming that they're taking it as like, oh, these kids think that like that is an appropriate thing to do to somebody. I mean, it might be the people they were hanging out with. It's probably to me, growing up as a young man, more of like, oh, the word doesn't matter because it's just a joke. It's just a silly joke. You know, that's why you got to try to be careful with the words that you use. That's why you got to, if your kid says some wild shit like that, you know, you got to discipline them for that. Because that's fucking crazy.
I realized I couldn't be a man.
And I think too, like at the end of the day, you are who you are, like internally, as far as like your personality goes, who you are as a person. You know, even if you are trans or you decide to change things about yourself, like that doesn't make you like all of a sudden this macho man within. You know what I mean? Like you're just because you do that doesn't mean you're going to, you know, talk to men, you know, in the same way that they might be viewing and talking about women.
Right.
So I think too that it makes sense that was something that kind of was like a shock to you. Like, hold on, you know what I mean? So, and it is sad because I think a lot of times that's just it's guy talk, and they think it's normal. But yeah, if women heard it, we would be disgusted. It's gross.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that doesn't surprise me, and I think too that could be something that would, I feel like in a way, scare you out of that.
It was
Sure, yeah.
I think the fear
Yeah.
Even when I was rejecting the labels woman and female and such, I knew that when they were talking about women, they were talking about me. And that scared me. I was too afraid.
I wonder how passable this person was when they were hanging out in more like male spheres. Because then it gets into question, like, I wonder if they were saying some of this stuff to be shocking. Because, you know, there's different passability levels and people will perceive you differently based on that.
I switched out of boys choir after that. And I've always hated public bathrooms, but I stopped using them after that because, well, I looked and sounded like a male. And so I would have to hear that stuff in the men's bathroom, and I would likely be attacked if I went into the women's bathroom. So I
Why is it normal for young boys and men to do? I mean, I mentioned it before. I think it's just because like, young boys and men are like edgier. And they're edgier, and like I think kids in general like lack empathy, but I think like young boys tend to lack a little more empathy or have less empathy than like, you know, girls. And so I think it like opens the door of like saying wild shit because they think it's like, wow, it's funny, it's shocking, it's edgy. We know we're not supposed to say and do this, but we're cool. You know, it's a lot of different things. I don't think it's generally meant to be like a negative or mean, rude thing, necessarily, or meant to hurt someone's feelings. It's like an edginess thing. And there's like a lack of empathy too. I mean, as a young girl, you're gonna have a different experience with like sexual assault as like a young boy. There's a higher chance. I mean, obviously boys can be assaulted and not every girl is, but there's a higher chance of you being a girl and being put in like an uncomfortable sexual experience than a young guy. Especially for me because I was so ugly. Sorry, I'm just fucking around. But so it's going to add like a different layer of lack of empathy, you know? Because as a girl, you know, you're educated when you're young that especially older men are disgusting. Like you're hearing that from a young age, that, like, you know, be careful of older men. They might try to like hurt you in some capacity in a different way from like young boys. Like, yeah, we tell every kid not to like, you know, hang out with strangers, but there's something very different about it when it comes to like young girls. You know, and everybody knows this, right? Like people will say like, no, that's not true. But then they'll be the ones to tell their daughter they can't go out at night because they know, you know what I mean? So it's a very intuitive thing that we know. You know, it's just a different relationship, and I think that's part of the factor as well. As a young guy, you're not, you know, necessarily told that it the same way, at least in the same vein. So there's usually a different like relationship with that. Jesus Christ.
I developed like chronic UTI issues, and
interesting.
Testosterone also doesn't help that. One of the more common consequences of testosterone use is urinary tract issues, and like I can't fully empty my bladder now because of the damage to those muscles by my behavior and by the hormones.
Right. So if there was any, I guess, advice that you could give to your younger self, or maybe even other people when you were that age, what would it be? I guess looking back now, and I know it's hard to say. I feel like because every month, every day,
seems like get better parents would be the advice. Jesus Christ.
Like I was saying, that's our mind is always changing.
I mean, the advice I would say is be a better parent, because that seems like a lot of this is like parental. And as a parent, I think people should understand that like you are the biggest support structure your kid has. So, you know, make sure that you help them get the correct treatment they need in every capacity and actually care about them.
But I guess from your personal experience,
I would tell myself that I was beautiful and that what happened to me doesn't define who I am going forward, and doesn't have to define how I look at myself. I really hated my body, as most 14-year-old girls do. And I wish I could tell myself from back then that it was just how I dressed myself. I was beautiful, and all these hormones and medications, I've been on a laundry list of medications, like psychiatric, aren't gonna make you feel better. The only thing that can make you feel better is healing. To other people, I would say heal because everyone has trauma.
Yeah.
Everyone has different stuff they're going through. Heal, talk to a therapist before you make any permanent life-changing decisions or before you have any organs removed.
And I was going to
Yeah, for sure. Make sure you're honest too. Because like I you know, this person went through a lot, but I would say that hearing some of the story, it seems like some of the way they expressed themselves may not have been the best way. And they were a kid going through a lot of identity issues because they were assaulted and they have a lot going on. But I would also say that part of it is try to be as honest with your feelings as possible when you express them to other people. You know, so that you can get properly diagnosed as well. Because I'm not trying to blame this person, but it seems like part of this is that they may have been they may have really wanted to get that trans diagnosis because it made sense to them at the time, and that unfortunately was just not the correct thing for them to, or gender dysphoria diagnosis, excuse me, and that just wasn't necessarily what they needed, you know. So that's why I say that, because when it comes to therapy, like there's a test to see if you have, you know, if you have an infection or this or that or whatever to get diagnosed physically, but mentally, like there's no, you know, they just have exams. They have like ask you questions to see like if you have a thing, but they can't like test you for something like objectively. The test is more, you know, based on the way you interact with the questions and the answers, and so you want to make sure that you're as honest as possible, you know. It's part of it.
Say too, I think, like you said, you know, loving yourself for who you are, no matter what that means, you know. And I think besides gender, just knowing, being confident in like, okay, this is who I am, this is the things that I believe in, these are my morals and all that, you know what I mean? All the important stuff that's deep down, because at the end of the day, this is just a show,
right? And
you can do whatever you want to it, I think, but getting to a place within that you really, really are confident in who you are as a human being, and treating others right, treating yourself right, loving yourself, and projecting that onto others. I think that's the most important thing.
For sure.
And I think that it's really sad that people are so judgmental, and with all these terms of like, okay, well, now you're not trans anymore. You can't be trans, or you are trans because you have this, and that. Like, I just think that people can identify however the fuck they want. Free speech, free choice, whatever. But the terminology and how angry people get is beyond me. Like, just let someone live.
For sure.
And I feel like I said, I know it's way bigger and way more complicated than this. But if at one point someone wants to be a woman and they want to be a man and they want to go back to it, like, that's their life. You know what I mean?
I mean, for me, it's like, it doesn't really mean anything to me. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you identifying as a man or a woman has no impact on my life. Like, let's be real, it has none. Like, it doesn't matter, other than people who like get very offended by these things. You know, what it means to be a man and a woman, you know, it's like, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, so.
The only person that really is dealing with that is that person. And I just feel like, I think that it comes from a place of like, I think a lot of times because there is so much hate in the world.
I think that it comes from a place of disgust. It's unjustifiable disgust, but that's what it comes from. It's something new and confusing, and then people find it disgusting, and they decide that they need to like legislate based on the way that they feel rather than like what's objective in the world. It's the same reason why there are people who are trying to legislate away divorce, because they just don't understand the world. Like, they don't understand things. It's why they want to legislate away gay marriage, because they just don't understand marriage. They don't understand, like, the Constitution separates church and state. They don't get it. It's more about how they feel more than anything else.
I think that trans people and just people in general from all different types of groups, they tend to get defensive, and they almost feel like they have to form this close-knit group that we're all alike because all we have is each other, and there is so much hate, and I get that. But I also think that someone like you, for example, shouldn't be, I guess, I don't want to say bullied, but shouldn't be treated differently because you didn't fit into the exact category, or you didn't go through it the same way as somebody else did. Because like I said, everybody experiences things differently. It's not always a clear-cut decision in life with anything. So I think that's the thing that I guess upsets me the most about it, is that people can be so like, you're either this or you're this or you're that. You know what? Just like, let people live. And I think that it's so important that you came on here to discuss your experience, because while for other people it might have been a very easy decision, you know, it seems like for you it was full of confusion isn't the word I'm looking for, but like
hesitation.
Yeah. And I don't think you had enough like information from the right people, like from those doctors. And I feel like even if you still decided to go down that road, I feel like if you had more, I guess, support, but in the way that was like really informative, if that makes sense, I just feel like at least you could have looked back and be like, okay, well, they did tell me all these things and I still made that. I feel like that's kind of where that kind of regret comes from, is feeling like you are looking back and like, well, I wasn't told this, and it was a fast process. And I think for some people, like you said, that is fine. But then for people in your case, you might decide, I don't want this anymore. And that's okay too. And I think that's important. I think it's important for people to hear all different sides of it, because there's definitely other people out there that even if they might not say it, they might feel like, well, what, even if it's not a regret, they might feel like, well, what if I didn't transition? Like, what if I would have stayed this way? So I feel like that's why it's important to discuss.
For sure. It's all very important. Like, I think what happened to me was a medical malpractice. And I think it would have been medical malpractice if it was done on like a 50-year-old real trans person. Like,
really? I don't think that that's true. Well, actually, never mind. I understand what they're talking about. They're talking about when like they got a botched surgery and then the person didn't come to them and be like, "Oh, hey, do you want some help?" You know, whatever. That might be considered it. I don't really know. That might be what they're referring to.
It wasn't wrong because I was young, and it wasn't wrong because I wasn't really trans, or that I would regret it later. I think it was wrong because I wasn't properly informed of the decision I was making. I mean, you're removing body parts. There are obviously going to be consequences.
Right.
But I wasn't told what those consequences were going to be. And I should have been.
And I think, too, like, not having someone not guarantee that that is the solution. Mm-hmm. Like, changing physical things isn't going to change things internally and mentally for you.
Yeah. There's this idea that you can be too far gone. That there are people who have been on hormones for, like, decades and who have had all their reproductive organs removed. And feel like, well, I made my bed. There's no going back, basically.
Yeah.
There are, I mean, it's just a fact that there are people identifying as trans right now that are going to detransition.
Yeah, sure. For various reasons. You know, they might detransition because it wasn't for them. They might detransition because they don't get enough financial support. They might detransition because they don't get enough emotional support from like friends or family. You know, there's a lot of different reasons to detransition. It's not just one thing.
There are people in like conservative states where they're banning this kind of healthcare that are going to be forced to detransition. And I think it's so important to clarify that there's life after detransition, and it can be beautiful. There are people that will understand what you're going through, and there are people who love you. There's this idea that I would rather die than detransition, and detransition can be a temporary thing. Like something like 60% of people who detransition retransition.
Yeah, you might detransition to have babies. Makes sense.
It can be a safety thing. For me, transitioning was very much a safety thing. I didn't want to be attacked for being a woman anymore, so I became a man. That will be what detransitioning will be for a lot of people. That you have to hide yourself until it's safe to be who you really are.
And I feel like, too, it seems like on both ends, you didn't find that safety.
Yeah.
And I think that's what can make things so confusing and scary, because we do live in a very evil world. Mm-hmm. And I think that no matter what you are, you can face a lot of negative things and trauma. And I almost feel like I said before, because you were set up to believe that transitioning was going to fix your problems, just to like kind of do that and then still not feel safe.
Yeah.
Is where it gets even more confusing and more like, well, this was supposed to help me. And yeah, I feel like that makes a lot of sense with the safety aspect of things.
I mean, no one's ever going to really, truly be safe because it's an evil world, like you said. And being a man didn't protect me from being abused again. I still got abused. Transitioning makes a lot of things harder. The bathroom stuff that I was talking about.
I wonder when they like what I wonder if that's one of the other, because they mentioned that they were groomed online, I think, and that they were physically a touch, hurt as well. And I wonder if part of it, like that, there was almost like a if it made them vulnerable, because there are statistics people will talk about. It's usually they bring it up in the context of trying to be like homophobic, where they're like, oh, like there's a trauma associated with being LGBTQ, and so what they make the conclusion that like everybody who's LGBTQ, it must be from trauma, right? It must be made from that. Whereas if you look at the information, I mean, that might be possible. In this person's case, it might actually be true. But in other cases, it might be like being LGBTQ makes you usually more vulnerable. Like you talked about how she felt isolated, or they felt isolated when they were, when they transitioned because of the different communities and this and that and the other thing. And I wonder if some of the abuse from when they transitioned to be a boy was more to do with isolation. It's a very complicated conversation, I think, about this topic.
And like, just hate, a lot of bullying, and there's just a lot of pain.
People care too much.
Yeah.
And they have too many opinions that really don't matter. Like, at all.
Right.
That's like something I'll never understand. Like,
hey,
ever. And I totally get that people can...
Well, I mean, listen, people are opinionated. I'm opinionated. I don't think that you have to be hateful in your opinions, though. You can express your opinion without being hateful. So.
Have their belief. Everybody has beliefs and mindsets and opinions, whatever. But like, there's so much more serious shit happening that like people are so worried about what someone's identifying as rather than people that are being kidnapped
Yeah.
or killed
Like-
or raped or anything, trafficked. Like, why does it matter?
Yeah.
What someone is who, and what is the point of bullying someone for that? Because you don't agree? Because you think it's weird? Like, I don't get it. Like, that's something that just like never made sense to me. Like, why do people care that
Yeah.
much?
Yeah. The only time it's appropriate to bully somebody for something like that is if they're a furry. Then it's okay. That's different. No, just kidding.
You think the person going into the bathroom is a man in a dress. Child marriage is legal in 29 states. Like,
True.
can we focus on the real issues? You know what I mean?
I mean, that is a phenomenal point. That is a good point, I'll say. Jesus.
Right. Like, that's not putting someone in like danger.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and that's someone's choice.
Yeah.
And like, if you're, I don't know, you're able to choose so many things in this world. You can choose to get, if you're a woman, you can choose to get breast implants. So what's the difference if you're a man and you want breast implants? Like, I don't know.
Exactly.
That's just how I just, why do you care? You know what I mean? That's just how I feel. But people, I think, want to feel like they're more powerful than they are and
Yeah.
have more opinions. And, you know, I see a lot of negative comments and people just writing mean things. And mind blowing to me. I can't even like explain it and wrap my head around it because like, I just feel like if you aren't like that, you're never going to understand somebody who is. But it's sad. Like I said, it really is sad to me that I feel like it's very hard in this world to find support from everyone and anyone. Like, it's like you have to find a specific group or like a doctor or a therapist. Like, why can't it just be anyone in your life? That just is like, maybe I don't exactly understand, but like, I'm here for you no matter what you decide to do. Like, I support you. We're all human at the end of the day. Man, woman, whatever. Like, we should just treat each other as humans.
For sure.
It's not like that.
No.
The world isn't that. No, it's not that easy.
Everyone always wants to have someone below them on the social ladder.
It makes them feel better.
Hey,
Yeah.
hey. I want someone to blow me right now.
Men want to be above women. Women want to be like. There's so many cross sections,
Right.
and I think potentially a reason why there's so much vitriol for detransitioners among the trans community could be that, like, well, at least I'm not the bottom tier. At least I'm not
Maybe.
the bottom rung of the ladder. You know, I get that there's a lot of pain in the trans community surrounding like people who went through too much puberty to be able to ever really fully pass as the gender that they want to. And so when someone says we should make it
Interesting.
harder to transition, that's where that pain comes from. That's where that, and I understand that. But you would think that a group that has been so socially weaponized would understand that the way a different group is socially weaponized doesn't reflect the views of that group, and especially not individuals within that group.
Yeah.
But that hasn't been my experience. They saw that detransitioner on TV, and so that must be what detransitioners think.
And I think too, not everyone, like we're saying, not everyone fits into a specific group.
Yeah, well, when it comes to detransitioners, like they said before, it seems like it's a lot more troublesome. Like the conservatives are paying detransitioners to like lie about their experiences.
Yeah.
You know, like everybody's different. Everybody has different mindsets and goes through different things. So I just feel like, and that's kind of why I stress like the importance of just having support from anyone and everyone, because not everyone is going to easily fit into one category of something.
Yeah, you can be trans and detransition.
Yeah.
And I guess some people would say that that's me, but you don't get to define somebody else. You can only define yourself.
Yep.
That's also something that kind of gets taken away from you when you detransition, is your ability to define your own identity. I've been told over and over that I was just a confused cis person, and that I'm talking over trans people by sharing my lived life experiences. And I don't think someone's life can be bigoted or prejudiced. Like, I could use my life experiences in bigoted or prejudiced ways, but what I experienced is what I experienced.
Absolutely. And I think, like I said, the more that different types of stories are shared, the more that there's always going to be somebody that's experiencing something similar. It might not be exactly the same, but somebody might be having maybe certain like thoughts or confusions. And I feel like, you know, having you come on here and explain your story is something that can confirm to someone else, maybe like, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
Or, wow, like I shouldn't feel bad for maybe wanting to go back on a decision I made. Because you shouldn't, I feel like with anything that you do, you
This
should.
person keeps like fucking moving their legs anxiously throughout the entire thing. Are these seats even comfortable? I don't know if my fat ass would be comfortable in that seat.
Feel like you can change your mind.
Yeah.
No matter what it is. Because we can.
And you won't, I'm talking to the audience now, I guess. You can go back at any point and it won't reflect on who you are as a person. Like, you will always be who you are. And it's not transphobic to regret your medical decisions. People have bodily autonomy, and a natural consequence of that is that sometimes people will regret things that they did with that autonomy. And that's not a good reason to take it away. I'm pretty sure the regret rate for abortion and chemotherapy and knee replacement surgery are all higher than the regret rate for transition.
Really? I mean, maybe. Is that true? I don't know if I would believe that. Why? Why would that be a thing? Chemotherapy regret rate. 13% of patients expressed regret at the 3-month time point after starting chemotherapy. Of note, nearly all patients express regret at this point could be identified at the 6-week. Interesting. Wait, why is this actually really high? Wow. Chemo, like, the regret rate for chemotherapy is like really high. I never even knew this. Interesting.
And that's not to say that people who regret it, their experiences aren't real or don't valid. Hi. But we are the minority in this situation. Most people who get this kind of care are better for getting this kind of care. And you're not wrong for not being better for it, but other people aren't wrong for being better for it.
Interesting.
No, overall, like I said, I think that it's...
Yeah, I mean, chemotherapy fucks you up, so I guess that makes sense. I just never would have thought about it like that because it's part of the process of healing, you know what I mean?
So important for different perspectives and experiences to be shared. And like I said, even if, I always say this to my guests, but even if somebody doesn't have the exact experience as you, there's always at least one person out there that I feel like it resonates with.
Yeah.
And they say, you know, even if it's a completely different circumstance, but I think that it takes a lot of courage and strength to openly say, like, I did this and now I don't want to go down that path anymore. And I think that it's because we do live in a world that's full of judgment.
How do people sit like this? That's my real question. I don't understand this.
And it can be scary. And I think the fact that you're willing to open up and be vulnerable and share that experience is so much about you and your strength as a person. And I feel like the main thing from this episode and having you on that I take from this is like we were saying, to not let anything define who you are as a person. Like, love yourself as a person. And whatever decisions you want to make them, don't make them, who cares? But, you know, any decision you make is okay and is fine. And I think, like I said, even if now, you know, you might regret things that you did or decisions that you made when you were younger, whether that was because of, you know, circumstances or lack of education, you still made them. And, you know, I think that in a way it was meant to be because now you can educate other people. Because I'm sure that there's still people that might make that decision and not have that education. And there might be kids that are doing their research and might stumble across this video and have, you know what I mean? Just have like a completely different perspective and a real life experience versus like an article they might read.
Right.
Or like a yes or no on Google. So I feel like that's really important because hearing from somebody just like straight on in a very raw format can give somebody a completely different understanding of something. Yeah. And especially because it's not something that's really talked about at all. So, and I always say that's something that's so important is to shed light on topics that aren't really discussed.
For sure.
Because it's just as important as the bigger ones.
Trans people are such a small population. And then detransition, like I said, it's 1% of 1%.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make it any less of a real experience.
Exactly. I agree. But thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your experience and your story. I appreciate it so much. You did incredible.
Oh, thank you.
Of course. Great job. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that was definitely an interesting video.
Hey guys, welcome.
It shed some light on a lot of interesting things, especially that like apparently detransitioners get paid a lot of money by conservatives to just lie about their experience, which is pretty fucking crazy. This person went through a very particularly traumatizing experience, and like every aspect of infrastructure from family, doctors to therapists to everything just seemed to have failed them, which is really unfortunate.